No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about a post that I saw from Steven Shadletsky, who's a friend of the show, one of our first interviews. And he posted something on LinkedIn probably a few weeks ago now that kind of made me think about this. And it's a topic I think we've touched on before, but this kind of reminded me of it, and I think it's so important. He says leaders treat people fairly but not uniformly. And what reminded me of this again was, on our last Thoughtful Thursday, we were talking about the number of people who don't take paid time off, and you mentioned, Lorenzo, that if one of your employees was making a request for some paid time off that might be kind of not in line with what your organization might typically say is okay for a time of year where they could take that off, it doesn't mean that it's like this, nope, I said no to other people, so I have to say no to you too, which might seem like the fair way to do it, but that's the uniform way to do it. It's not necessarily the fair way to do it. And we encounter this in a lot of areas. There are employees who need special accommodations or circumstances because of whatever is going on in their life, and it could be a temporary thing, it could be a permanent thing, and that doesn't mean that you're not treating your other people fairly just because you're not treating all of your employees uniformly. What do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and it's a reminder. I think that similar to kind of the idea of consistency, like we're looking for consistency of an outcome, but not necessarily consistency of how you do it, because then it becomes very kind of uniform and robotic. But I think that, we work in the gray, we live in the gray. This is the people business, and there are very clear policies and procedures, again, that have to do with legalities and health and safety and things like that, where like these are kind of like non-negotiable and must be this way for everyone. But when it comes to things like that, specifically around like time off and requests and things like everything in that space, for the most part, should be at least looked at and discussed. And I do understand in certain businesses, in certain industries, certain times of the year, that is really difficult, and that more than likely in some instances that's going to put a burden on other people to have to do more work or work longer hours. Like that is more than likely. So like that, all of that has to be had in the conversation. But I absolutely believe that the right thing to do is to have that conversation and that dialogue, because sometimes those moments, over time, they cause resentment. Those are the times that it may mean a whole lot to somebody that we show up as leaders and we make a decision that is right for them and is supportive. And if we don't make that decision and that person is a great talent and they end up leaving to go somewhere else, like you kind of have to rewind a little bit and think about these types of moments. So again, I understand, and I have been in times and places where I'm like, I would love to do this, but like, this is what's going on. This is going to be really difficult. We need to have more conversation. Like we need to bring in more people, especially those that may be peers of yours that are going to be impacted by this. Like we need to have some transparent dialogue about it. And then what has happened, I think, if not every time, almost every single time, was a peer group said, hey, we want to support this person because like they've done it for us. We've had this, they've done that. They don't do this all the time. Like if we have to work a little bit harder so that they get this opportunity, then like we're in. And I think that is a way that allows there to be not just a single decision in the moment, not something that's just a yes or no right away, but that there's more dialogue that happens, and there's more people that are brought in that are going to be impacted by the decision.
Right, treating people uniformly is let's be perfectly honest here. It's easy. It's easy to treat people uniformly. That's managing a policy. That's not leadership. That's not taking into account the nuance of individual people's situations. That's allowing the policy or the playbook to dictate the leadership, as opposed to the leader looking at that policy or that playbook and saying, hey, you know what, this fits 85 or 90% of the time, but 10 to 15% of the time it doesn't fit. And if we follow this playbook exactly like it was dictated, which was really meant to be guideposts, not meant to be, something, the Bible of what we do. It was meant to be guideposts. And so if you as a leader are defaulting to that, what you're essentially doing is you're giving up your authority as a leader to the policy. It's as simple as, ma'am, I would like to return this for you but you are 3 days past the return policy. It's like, no, if you would like to, then you would. You wouldn't like to, you want to default to the policy. That's the simple way of looking at it, but it applies to everything. It applies to your people looking for time off when they want it, or an accommodation of, if you're expected to show up to work at 9:00 in the morning and there's an issue with an employee who says, hey, you know what, my kid has been having an issue with school drop off in the morning where they're having this separation anxiety from me, and they don't want to be let out of the car. And, about 3 days a week, I get a phone call from the school saying that there's an issue, and then I got to go back to the school again. And so I need to be able to not come into work until 9:30 instead of 9:00 for the time being. I'll let you know, and I'll update you every week, and I'll let you know what's going on with that, but I need this for right now. And it's like, okay, that doesn't mean that you have to do that for every employee. It doesn't mean that all of your people now get to start work at 9:30. It means that you stand behind it, because it aligns not with a policy, but with your values of taking care of your employees fairly and not uniformly. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is, I want to know about a time when you had to do this, when you had to treat your employees what you thought to be fairly, but that was absolutely the antithesis of treating them uniformly. And so I want to ask you that, but first I want to give up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, have you ever had to treat your employees what you believe to be fairly but not uniformly? And what was kind of the conversations that had to happen around it in order to make sure that your people didn't just think that you were playing favorites?
Yeah, it happens, like I said earlier, quite a bit when it comes to a lot of different things. When you have a complex business with different responsibilities, with different ways of getting work done. What jumped right into my head immediately, though, was kind of coming out of the travel restrictions from kind of, the world shutting down. And I have a lot of workforce that's international and has family and friends that lived in other countries. And, you're talking about grandparents not having seen their grandkids or their children in sometimes, a couple of years, which was just not a typical part of, what they were doing and how they were doing things. So I had a lot of requests as travel restrictions started to open up, and sometimes in the middle of holidays and at times like that where, families were trying to just come together and see one another physically and be together. There was a flood of requests for different ways of getting that done. And, was it the right thing to do to talk to a parent about, not having seen their parents in a while and not having seen their, the grandparents of their children and that type of, these were real conversations full of real emotion. And, a lot of instances they knew what they were asking, which was like, we know this is not typical and this is not something that we would normally ask for, or this time of year, this type of thing. And so, it was a lot of that, but it was conversations with leadership team, bringing everybody together that was asking, building out some lists around what people were asking, what could we do, how could we make this work, explaining and sharing again with people, saying like, this is something that, people are asking, kind of like, it's one of those situations where you're opening Pandora's box once you kind of make it public, because like the tempting thing to do is say, let me talk to the 5 or 6 people that are asking, and if I can do this right, I can probably make it happen and most people won't notice. But the right thing to do was get in front of the entire team and say, hey, this is going on right now. And we've had multiple people ask us, and we're working through this to figure this out because we want to take care of our people. But if you're also maybe having this dilemma or trying to work through it, please come talk to us, because you may have people that are like, there's no way they would do that for me, or I wouldn't even think about asking because, of what's going on. we really want to be upfront about it and say, this is what's happening, what's going on. Let's have some conversation about it, and let's just talk through some of this. And that just created an opportunity for us to say, yes, we want to. Can we do this, or can we adjust that? And once we kind of went with a larger conversation, it made it a lot easier to navigate and to ask for like give and take. Yes, we can do this. Is it possible for you to have this time at this time, or these days, or is the family coming here? Can you work a day in the middle? Like stuff like that. Just trying to get very creative and taking care of people. But that was one of those times when, like we definitely did some things that I thought were very fair, but were not necessarily uniform with the approaches that we've had in the past.
Right. The kind of inclination to do things, as you put it, behind the scenes, kind of just figure it out with the small group of people that brought it up. I think that could be very tempting for a lot of leaders, because you're right, it does open Pandora's box, and you start thinking, well, I can accommodate these 2 or 3 people, but if the world knows that I'm accommodating these 2 or 3 people, they're going to want to be accommodated too, and then now it's going to be a lot harder to do this. But I'll tell you, there's no way to stop it from coming out, because the absence of those 2 or 3 people that you helped out during whatever time of year that is going to be noticed. It's going to be noticed. And you're not going to ask people, hey, yeah, I'll give you this time off, but don't tell anybody. You can't mention to anybody that you're off. Like that's ridiculous, right? So there has to be a broader conversation around it, because it will come out anyway. And once it comes out, it will look like you are playing favorites. That will be the interpretation. You are playing favorites. And the people who didn't ask, because as you put it, they thought they didn't know they could ask. It then puts this precedent forward that your values are such that you prioritize people who are good at self-advocacy. And not everybody is good at self-advocacy. And so if, as a leader, if you know that, it's no different than a person who ends up making over a 5-year period 20% less than all their peers, because they never thought they could ask for a raise, and their peers did, so they got that money. So it's like, well, that's not fair. Then I didn't ask. This is the exact same thing. If you know your people aren't going to ask, if you know your people would potentially benefit from something, and you know that it's impossible to treat them uniformly, fairly sometimes is the exact opposite of uniformly. And so I think that's a great example, and I love that.
Cool. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.